Back to that breaking story over the weekend and into this Monday morning. Let's catch up with Bloomberg's Guy Johnson out of London on the what next in Europe. Guy, what next?
Well, EU leaders are talking about this right now. This was going to be an EU summit, leaders gathering, not much really expected to come out of it. Certainly this narrative has hijacked, to use the phrase appropriately in relation to what has just happened, the whole kind of agenda. And we're now waiting to see what's going to happen, John. I think a number of things potentially on the table. There are certainly discussions at this stage about basically cutting off the air bridge from Minsk into the EU, maybe cutting off the land border as well. It's unclear at this point whether or not that would affect transit aircraft, but some EU countries are already starting to make their own kind of opinions felt and use their own airspace effectively as a bargaining tool here, John. It's going to be interesting to see whether Lithuania does this. It's already talking about the potential for banning transit, i.e. if you're coming out of Moscow, you're going through northern Belarus, you're then going into a bit of Latvia, and then you're going down to a number of German airports that use that route. Maybe you couldn't do that. Most southern routes still go kind of out of the EU via Poland, through Belarus, and then out to Moscow or out to Asia. But certain countries, John, potentially saying, you know what, if you want to do that, you can't use our airspace. So certainly the narrative has changed significantly around this EU summit. The question of already tight sanctions being tightened further looks like very much a real one at this point, John. We'll just see exactly where everybody lands again.
Well, Guy, let's talk about the rhetoric that's been used right now. And I just wonder how loaded the following phrase actually is. When they start talking about a state-sponsored act of terrorism and alluding to that kind of thing, just how important is that language this morning on what could come eventually later on this evening into tomorrow?
Well, I think there's certainly outrage, John. But whether or not that outrage actually translates into something material, we will wait and see. Clearly, there is a kind of there's sort of two narratives around this. One, do you want to affect what is happening inside Belarus, or do you want to, as often sanctions are used for, appeal to your own domestic base, be seen to doing something? So it'll be interesting to see which way we come down on this one. But certainly there is energy behind this process now, energy within this process to make further changes, to tighten the sanctions further. And I think certainly cutting off transport is something that is being considered. But that does come with risks, because effectively you are cutting off a population which may be opposed to the regime in Minsk, and that is certainly something that I think the EU leaders are going to have to think quite carefully about. Sanctions are already fairly tight on this regime.
Guy, looking forward to the coverage starting at 10 Eastern in about 37 minutes' time. It is the dilemma for European leaders. How do you punish the state, the government, without isolating the people and pushing the country further towards Russia? That's the European problem this morning.